So welcome to all of you. I want to. I'm going to talk for a little while, and then I'd love to have a dialogue with you around practice and what's coming up for you, what your questions are, what's hard to practice with, what you're trying to figure out how to practice with. I'm going to start with just a few comments. So this is a time of a lot of intensity. I know there are have been, even just over the past number of days, kind of varying degrees of consciousness about what's happening, and sort of rapidly evolving sense of the seriousness of what's happening, depending on where you are and depending on what you're tuning into. So my hope is that I can support you in practicing with what's arising, to really including this mind and body, your mind and body, as part of the content of experience. And hopefully using this time as a kind of retreat. Retreats are, in a way, structures for deep introspection and contemplation. And they often involve renouncing many of our usual behaviors and even pleasures, and a lot of the usual activity. And I think that might not be a bad frame for a lot of us who are in an area where we're practicing both social distancing and not being asked to go into work, or being asked to not go into work. And sometimes that means that because I know so many of you. Well, usually I see many of you in person on Sundays, and now I'm not seeing you, just being here in this way. But I know if you're living alone, or you're that this can be a tough time, right? Or one could feel isolated, separate. You're being told specifically to stay 6 feet away from other people, and if you don't live with people, that can be isolating, which can be a challenge, right? Now, of course, as meditators, this is something that we are familiar with and have a structure for practicing with. And some of you are in the opposite situation. You're at home, and all of your kids are home all the time, and it's just total chaos. And I'm sure there's many gradations of in between, but it could be easy to kind of long for the condition that the other person has, right? Oh, it would be nice to be in a chaotic situation with a lot of people and feeling connected in that way, even if imposed upon. And others might feel like, oh, just to have some space might be amazing. So when we are practitioners of awareness, of meditation, of mindfulness, our job is to take what is appearing in our conditions as the path. And one of the biggest obstacles to that kind of deepening is kind of longing for somebody else's path. So the whole kind of unfolding of and stabilizing of our own wakefulness comes about from connecting with present moment experience. And so the conditions of this moment are your present moment experience. That's what we need to be present to. So that's true in the formal meditation, right? You don't hear me say you're supposed to have some particular experience. You're supposed to make pleasant feelings arise. You're supposed to have a calm mind. I never say that, and that's not the instruction. The instruction is to stabilize your attention with the breathing. You're used to, and everybody is like this, right? You're just used to being in the habit of being run by your thoughts. So whatever you're thinking, that's what's going on for you, right? And so if you start to practice, you watch the mind, you notice it's mostly just going from one thought to another, one plan or remembrance or regret, or trying to rework the past, or trying to strategize about the future. or telling your self stories in the present. And that's the habit of our untrained mind. Right? And so here we establish present moment wakefulness. We use the breathing body as some place to land with our attention that's not based in a thought world, a virtual world. Some place to land, and we learn how to connect with just this present moment experience, just the felt sense, the direct sensations of breathing in, breathing out. Maybe at the nostrils, feeling the flow of the air at the nostrils, or the chest expanding and softening, the belly rising and falling. Right? So as we connect in that way, moment by moment by moment, our attention learns how to connect and to be here, to abide here. As there's a little bit of stability in the attending, then we can let the rest of what's happening happen around it and in the background. Then it can start to be included in awareness, right? As opposed to just taking us. Right? It's almost like our attention just gets pulled into the thought world and it becomes the world we're in. And when we're worried, we're not aware of worry as an appearance in the mind. We're, oh man, So again, it's not that worry is wrong or unnatural. It's that we want to include it in awareness rather than having it include us in a way. Right? So during this time, whatever the conditions of your life, right, I want to encourage you to cultivate present moment wakefulness. And the curriculum is what's appearing now. So we use the breathing in the formal practice as a stand-in, but we can also learn how to connect just with what's appearing in the environment through seeing. Right? This is all present moment experience. Right? So seeing is happening, and this is connecting. Okay? Hearing is happening, and that is, connecting is even the wrong word. It's like appearing within you. Okay? So the stability at first, it seems like it's about the breathing, but actually, no, the breath is just a device to help you have something tangible to land on. It could be the breath, it could be the sense of the whole body sitting, it could be the sounds appearing in the environment. So because you're in the habit of being in the torrent of thinking, and probably right now it's even stronger, right? Because there's so much to think about, and there's so much to worry about, and there's so much to strategize about, legitimately. But so probably, even if you've been practicing for a while, the degree or the force of that mind content has more valence to it, more juice. Right? So the breathing is kind of an anchor, but so too is just this present moment wakefulness. Yeah? Just whatever's appearing moment by moment. Yeah? So that way we have a kind of a grounding, a stabilizing. Right? In a way, you can use all of what's appearing through the senses as support for awareness. Right? It's, in a way, it's supporting awareness. Usually we don't notice it. We just think, oh, the world's happening, I'm in it, and I'm moving around and being moved around. So include your inner experience in this awareness. What you don't include will shape you. If you're at home and your kids are driving you crazy, which I know your kids never do, right? Notice the sensations that appear in your body. Use that as practice. Meet that with awareness. Breathe with it. Feel the feelings. Notice what your mind says. The stories that churns out. This shouldn't be happening. Should be this other way. Kids should whatever. Just notice that. If you're alone in your home and you start feeling lonely, let loneliness be an object of attention. Okay? Loneliness is a state. And it can be witnessed. Boredom is a state. If you ever feel bored, people go on retreat, sometimes feel bored. They don't admit it, but they do. So when boredom arises, see if you can watch boredom as a state. Notice how it arises due to conditions and how it passes away. Now, of course, boredom is a little bit interesting because boredom is often a function of the kind of a lack of a kind of quality of attending. Yeah? So when the attention is really connecting with an object or with whatever's appearing, boredom doesn't usually arise. But what happens when you think nothing interesting is happening, meaning nothing is novel in your story, right? Oh, I'm home again. Oh, it's the same thing as yesterday. When you have a narrative like that, it's easy not to connect with present experience. And that's how people end up relating to people who they live with in very habitual ways. Oh, it's you again. I know you. And, it's sort of like the attention just stops connecting, right? Because of the story, it's the same. Yeah. But of course, then you're in a new situation. The attention really connects. And you think it's because the new thing is so compelling. So during this time, anyway, whether you're at home in chaos or at home in stillness, see if you can connect, almost like drop down into connecting with what's actually happening right now. What's happening now is new and fresh. This has never happened before. This will never happen again. And I say this a lot, because we're at the leading edge of life. This is unformed. So, and I said this in the notes, if you didn't read the notes I sent out to the email list, or you're not on the email list, I think we posted them on the sundaysangha.net website, so you can read some of those practice notes which I sent out. But the thing I really hope that all of you will practice with, as you're reading the news, as you're preparing for whatever you need to prepare for, as you're attending to the logistics of where you're going to be, or where your kids are going to be, or where your parents or relatives are going to be, where your friends are going to be, as you're attending to that, please include the states of mind that are arising from moment to moment. Please include them in awareness. When you include them, they're a part of what's happening. They're an aspect of what's here. They're not the whole field. That way, you are not shaped totally by what's appearing. Worry can still appear, but oh, this is worry. Thoughts that are fueled by that state appear. You're imagining futures, disaster scenarios. It's not to say that they won't happen that way. It probably won't happen exactly the way you're imagining it, but witnessing that, again, so it doesn't totally take you over. And you will have if you're paying attention to your body states and your mind states, you'll notice they are changing from moment to moment throughout the day. Most people without a practice, they are completely at the mercy. And we all know this from our pre-practice life, or even maybe it feels like from very recently. Know what it's like to have no refuge in awareness. To just be whatever the state is that's happening. Yeah? You're sad and the world conforms to your sadness, and you conform to the story of your sadness. You're angry and the world takes shape as what you're angry at. And everything, other people, they take the shape of your anger. It's shaping in that way. Yeah? You're afraid and everything is terrifying. You think that something about yourself, and that becomes the way it is. 5 minutes later, you think something different. That becomes the way it is, but you don't notice the difference. Okay? So please practice like this. I said this in the notes, but part of what we need in a crisis, in a time when it really is important how we act and behave, we need clarity of mind. Right? We need some balance internally so that we can continue to be good to each other and to be clear-headed in our actions. Right? And so that we can also be loving and lovingly connect with each other. Right? And that makes such a difference. I noticed that even walking today, we're playing ball, and the ball went over the fence, and the people walking by, they didn't want to pick it up and they said, like, sorry, COVID-19, but we had a really nice, just like, the openness. And it's so easy for people to let fear take over and to close you down. So I want to say something now about this kind of practicing with social distancing, because I think that's such an interesting term. And also, it's so important to do right now as a protection. But I notice for people, it actually, and I notice this in myself too, it actually conflicts with all of our social impulses. our impulse to kind of seem friendly and to be nice. Yeah. And I think that's a place where practice is really important, right? So that we can do, and this is actually a practice I think will be useful to you in your life after this crisis. Yeah. How do you do the thing that is actually compassionate, that is actually kind, and that is actually the right thing to do, even when it's hard? Yeah, when it's socially hard, like hard not to pick up somebody else's ball. I mean, I don't fault them for not picking it up, or to not give somebody a hug. Yeah. Or if you're feeling well, to not shake somebody's hand. Yeah, that actually takes something. So I want to encourage all of you also to notice the feelings that arise, that feeling of, oh, I should, or that kind of visceral tug, and to actually breathe with it, notice it arise and pass so that you can stay true. Yeah? So that you can do the thing that's actually compassionate. I think that's a wonderful way to practice. And because so much of the time our default behavior is kind of some kind of social conditioning that may or may not help you get at the truth or go deeper in your life, or to deepen in your relationships. Doesn't mean you always have to say what's true, but just to pay attention to that, and to not be carried by the momentum of habit. So of course, we wouldn't wish these conditions upon ourselves or upon anybody. But within them, we need to learn how to use practice as a support. Yeah? And it can support you in that way. So that's one thing about social distancing. Yeah? I don't know why I put quotes on it, about the kind of social distancing we're doing. The other piece about social distancing that relates to retreat is that on a retreat, it's interesting because on retreat, you're with a lot of people, but you don't interact with them at all. In a way, it's very similar to what we're doing, only more so because you don't talk to them, you don't even make eye contact. We don't call it social distancing on a retreat. That has a certain kind of feeling to it. Yeah? So it is, in effect, that, but it's in service of something. So on a retreat, our social distancing is in service of deepening into our own experience, of kind of deep connecting and introspection and exploring the territory of the mind, body, and the territory of experience so that we can learn something. So when you're on a retreat, and some of you haven't been on retreats, I think it's a useful thing to say, with 100 other people or 50 other people, or especially if it's a silent retreat, even though nobody's looking at each other, the understanding is we are all supporting each other in this deepening. Yeah? So my act of kindness, my act of support of you is to not interact with you and not talk with you and not make signs to you or look at you. That's a support. So in a way, that's a form of love, an act of love. Again, I think that's a useful frame for this time, right? So that you can think of both your not interacting in certain ways as an act of love and support for people's health, and also think of your stepping out of the habit flow of activity as an invitation to deepen in your own experience. You can use the tools of meditation. Of course, the meditation structure is a framework for helping you deepen. There's a lot of times people, when they want to introspect, they just say, oh, I'll just think about stuff, which doesn't always lead to deepening. Yeah? So the basic instructions, connecting with the breathing, connecting through your senses, staying here, allows us to stabilize our own attention. When awareness when we're stable here in awareness, then we can see much more clearly what's appearing from moment to moment, both in the outer world and in the inner world. Yeah? So that's my invitation to you. Use this time as a retreat. And it may be a chaos family retreat. It may be a self-retreat. Things that can be helpful on retreat are having a schedule, so you don't have to invent it. Having a little bit of structure. And I hope the morning meditations this week maybe will help you with that. So you get up and ready to sit at 7. You start with practicing. Now I'm going to end the thing at 7:30, but you're welcome to make it like a retreat. You can practice all morning, sit and walk and sit and walk, or what have you. Okay? Yeah, one more thing. We're so used to thinking of connection as like, I connect with you, meaning we talk about some content. Right? And I said something about this in the notes, but when you pay attention to the nature of awareness, when you just notice, right, are sounds far or near? A distant sound has a texture to it, which lands in your own being, in your awareness. Is that far or near? When the eyes are open and the world is appearing, it is appearing in your awareness. Is it outside of you? Is it inside of you? This is a kind of connecting. Connecting is the wrong word because connecting is dualistic. That's a kind of oneness that is here all the time. It's part of the nature of awareness itself. So I'm always saying that, right, is that we're always looking for awareness as an object. But awareness is not an object. Awareness is in a way, it's just what's underlying all of experience, including the experience of this body and the experience of this, what we call this world. All of it is appearing. It's appearing to you, but is appearing to what? Well, it's just appearing. And so a lot of times in the meditation, people are saying, well, I pay attention to this, and attention is something that's moving. But attention and awareness are not the same thing. Because you can pay attention to the breathing and still be aware of somebody talking in the background. So awareness has this panoramic and inclusive quality. Yeah. Awareness is what notices your attention move. Yeah. And this is the domain of what we want to call, if you want to call, the transcendent. Yeah. That which is here all the time, in which everything is appearing, including you. Yeah. If you look for it, you don't find anything. But if you relax and stop looking for it, you notice you're seeing through it. Yeah. Everything is happening through it. So this is hard to talk about, but this is a kind of, again, connecting is something that sounds like it needs an object. But this is a kind of connectedness or completeness that is really worth settling into. And sometimes when the outer activity gets disrupted, there's actually an opportunity to cease a little bit of the becoming energy, of the always being on your way somewhere. On your way to achieve something or get to the next thing, on your way to your next project, or perfectly valid things that you're working on. There's a wonderful opportunity when some of that stops or actually breaks down for whatever reason, to settle right here into your own being. Because you might discover something about the nature of your own awareness. Something that, in a way, you've been looking for your whole life, right? Looking for some kind of completeness or some kind of fulfillment or kind of the end or a certain kind of connectedness or a certain kind of okayness. That's what everybody's looking for, and everybody's looking for it in the object world. Everybody's looking for it in the world of experience. I'll have this experience, I'll have these kinds of relationships, I'll have people who think this way of me. We're always looking for that kind of fulfillment in the object world. And we miss where it actually lies here and now, which is right here in the nature of your own being, this beingness, which includes all of what's appearing, all of life. And you can feel the flavor of settling into this beingness. Right? You can notice some of the qualities. The qualities are, in part, that some of this becoming energy doesn't have much to run on anymore. Yeah, it's that desperate searching. It kind of becomes meaningless in a way. Yeah? So a lot of that compulsive energy quiets down. And then these qualities of nothing missing, not non-limitation, not, yeah, completeness. Start to like they be palpable or be sensed. Yeah, again, not something you see somewhere. It's in the nature of being itself. So my hope is, as again, I talk about this so that even we can have a little bit of an idea of it, yeah, and also so you can have a framework for understanding and noticing in yourself when that becoming energy is strong, or when you're on your way somewhere in the mind. Yeah? Can you watch that sense, that impulse? Yeah? Watch that sense of incompleteness when it appears. That appears as an object in experience. Yeah? So even when you feel like, oh, there's something lacking or not enough, something is knowing it. Right? So again, these are pointers to help you settle into what's here now. And I do think that this time is an opportunity to break some of the habit energy. Maybe it'll break some of the habit energy in some of our systems, but it's certainly an opportunity to break some of the habit energy in our own mind stream and maybe in our daily lives. Again, none of us would have wished for this to happen, and it's our job to be as clear as possible in the midst of it all. And maybe even it will be an invitation for you to touch into and settle into your own being in a way that is new or qualitatively different, even if you've been here all along. So I think we can, let me just see. I think we can take some, well, I wasn't looking at the chat. Now there's a lot of people chatting in here. Let's see. Let's see. Well, where can you find links for the morning meditation? If you subscribe to the WKZ Sangha YouTube channel, you can find them there. Okay. So, do you, anyway, I really enjoyed the dialogue we had last time. I felt like your questions really helped to deepen the conversation and helped us to deepen in some of the topics I was talking about. And I also loved, it was an unexpected part of the kind of having to migrate to YouTube for our sitting, that I thought it was interesting the way that the questions, because you could write them sometimes while other people were asking or while I was responding, it kind of had a thread to them that deepened as we went. So yeah, if you have any questions or comments, I'll just read the ones that seem uh, strike me, and we will we'll go deepen that way. And again, topics for the dialogue are: what's happening for you? What are you practicing with? If possible, let's keep it close to your direct experience and of your own practice, because those are actually the most interesting and the most useful questions. I find they're kind of the most specific. So anybody want to write in? And then I'm going to see if I had a. Athena has a long question above. Okay. Okay. Oh, being challenged. You find it hard to deal with being challenged by friends and acquaintances who are not being careful. Uh, yeah. So I'm going to summarize very quickly what your question. Yeah. When other people are behaving in ways, and I'm going to generalize from this, behaving in ways that you find problematic or even dangerous, that is a tough thing, especially if they're people in your life. You know? And so I don't have any kind of particular answer about what you should do. I don't know what you should do. But I do think that it's always a challenge when you're talking to somebody about something, especially something you feel charged about, or you feel is kind of a life and death situation. It's always a challenge to be able to do it in a way that doesn't create like an oppositional interaction, right? And now sometimes it's okay to create an oppositional interaction. You just have to tell people the truth and tell them what you think. That doesn't mean they'll change. You know? So I think it's a really good practice to practice. How do you say the direct thing in a way that's still kind? Yeah. And to also that takes into account the fact that people have different degrees of awareness about something. I mean, this is something that relates to like climate change or all kinds of things. In fact, I was just on the phone. I won't go into details because I don't, but I had to, talk to somebody who was planning something, and I felt like the awareness around what was happening with the outbreak was really lacking. Right? It's very hard to talk to somebody who has a different consciousness about something because they have different information, and they're just seeing it differently. So I found that challenging. And I think the challenge is to say what's true and to understand at the same time that people don't move right away. You know? And sometimes they need to, if they care about you, hopefully they will hear you. But I think it's a good practice to say the uncomfortable thing. So let's see. Trisha. I'm aware of thinking that deepening into my own experience seems selfish and self-centered. So everything landing as a form of connection is really helpful. See part 2. As one is beginning to practice deepening into their own experience, might they in fact go through a period of being self-centered, even though we try to include the other in the field of awareness? I think it's a wonderful question. A lot of people I run into that a lot. People say like, oh, it's self-centered to meditate, or it feels that way. And because I hold that when we are to some degree, even a little bit, liberated from some of our own conditioning, when we don't believe everything we think, when we can see our own view or opinion as a view or opinion, boy, are we of service to the world in a completely different way. Yeah. When we can be with suffering and not be completely taken over by it, when we can be with other people's challenging mind states without being completely taken over by them, boy, is that not a service to society. So, of course, on the far end, and I think you're speaking to this, we can see the benefit to the world, even just to your own children or to your community. Yeah, if you are, and I've shared stories so much about, many of you heard about just seeing transformation in people about how they relate to their kids. Now that changes the world, right? Just somebody who has their own conditioning from their childhood and isn't reenacting it completely, even just has a little bit of space around it. It doesn't mean they're being some kind of perfect parent. That can change the world. But at first, it does take some attending to your own mind stream. That is, and that might feel selfish or self-centered to attend to your own being. Yeah. And I really encourage you to notice the conditioning that comes up that says, I don't have the time, or the time I'm taking to meditate and attend to my own experience is selfish. Because people waste so much time on social media and watching TV and doing stuff, but nobody thinks of that as selfish, right? But as soon as we're aware with our own experience, it sort of feels like, oh man, I'm being so selfish. Yeah, but it's hard to be with your own experience, right? That's why not everybody's just signing up to sit there and be with their experience from moment to moment. So I think, when we look to so many of our great leaders, the people we admire and respect, Gandhi and Martin Luther King, right? There's often a contemplative aspect, right? It's not just acting in the world. That action comes out of something. comes from a deeper place, right? So I think that's a wonderful question. And I think you just, in a way, have to tolerate and yet also include and observe just the conditioned patterning that says, this is selfish, this is self-centered. Because I think the impact for the world is so obvious. Yeah? It's obvious even in the near term. So thank you for that. I like this question. I think this is useful. I like a lot of the questions, but anyway. I'm new to meditation practice. When I'm meditating, I just feel as if I can't possibly be doing it right. How does one know if they're doing it right? Well, I will say that is a really great statement. You can't know if you're doing it right. And it will feel like you're not doing it right. That's probably the sign that you're doing it right, is if it feels like you're not doing it right. And the reason I say that is because when you start practicing, and it sounds like you have recently started, when you just start, your mind is going to be all over the place. That is that's the state of things most of the time. Yeah. And so, so probably most of what you're noticing is you're struggling with that. You can't stay with the breath almost at all. Yeah. Or you can't stay with present experience almost at all because you're always being taken out by some thought. So that's when you get the feeling, I must not be doing it right. Yeah. And the reason I say that means you're doing it right is because you're noticing. Most people are completely run by their mind all the time, but they don't notice it. Yeah. So when people sit down, they say, my mind wasn't staying still for a moment. I say, you were paying attention. You are seeing the way it is. Yeah. Now, of course, it takes a little bit of cultivation and familiarizing yourself with awareness. And that happens slowly and gradually, and just don't be in a rush about it. Yeah. But and as you actually deepen a little bit, as you get a little more stable with your attention, sometimes you'll see more of what your mind is actually doing. Yeah, so you might feel like you're actually getting worse at it. So I would say, just stick with the basic instructions. When you notice you're wondering if you're doing it right, just let that be another thought and come back to it. Yeah, you won't feel like you're doing it right, probably, for a while. Yeah, and when it stops feeling that way, you still won't feel like you're doing it right. You'll just be trusting more in awareness. Okay. Let's just see. What if the anxiety in the present moment experience is really overwhelming and has a lot of energy that feels like it could unfold into a panic attack if I stay with the body as an object? Skillful means for that. Great. So two things. One is sometimes the energy in the body or the energy of a particular state is it's so big and so overwhelming that actually it kind of overwhelms your capacity to stay with it. And last week I talked about ways you can let that energy be bigger. You can let it not just be locked in the body. You can let it fill the room or fill the sky. So in a way, you're just, with your mind or your imagination, you're letting it be bigger. Yeah, because awareness is already infinitely vast, right? So that little device of letting it fill the room, letting it fill the sky, letting it fill the universe is just a way of you relaxing your kind of trying to get a hold of it, right? So I was talked about that a little bit last week. But in terms of other places to land with your attention, I find that hearing as a domain of attending is a very useful grounding, right? Because hearing is, in a way, it really opens the mind up and helps you to not feel trapped in your body. So if people have a lot of really painful body experience, or the body is just physically painful, you have a lot of chronic pain or something, um, or if you, just the states that are arising are just too much for you, or you get too reactive to them, hearing is a wonderful anchoring for the attention. Partly because it keeps the mind fluid and open, because the sounds are unpredictable. So you're resting in a kind of an openness, a receptive openness to what's appearing. So I would encourage you to maybe try practicing that way. Another way is you can feel the ground. You can either touch the ground, or just feel the contact of your butt in the chair or your feet on the floor. And sometimes that kind of grounding is very helpful. And you can use actually the touch points of your butt on the chair, your left foot on the floor, your right foot on the floor. And you can use that as your primary domain of attending. So that's not in this kind of like part of the body where we tend to have a lot of those feelings. That can be very grounding and stabilizing. So you might try those things. And but I'll say one other thing about the panic stuff is that, and you know this already, I know, but I think it's still useful to say for others, is that it's the fear of panic that makes it ramp up. So there's probably two things happening. Some anxiety state, which energetically is very like, anxiety is so fluttery. Yeah? It's so unstable as a state. Yeah. So what was I saying about that? I forgot. I lost it. I forgot what I was saying. The panic. Yeah. So two things can be happening. One is there's that state, and then there's the fear of where it's going to lead. Yeah. So the panic is usually about the future. So again, you may not always be able to do this, but if you can just really embrace what's happening now, and notice the fear and include the fear, sometimes that can really diffuse the panicky feeling. Because the panic is like the fear of the anxiety, or the anxiety about the anxiety. It kind of just ramps up like that. Oh yeah, Trisha followed up saying, I don't think falling into the news stream is selfish, but it takes away from making calls to see how someone is doing. All right, Sage, when I try to stay centered and relaxed while communicating in conversation with others, I get torn between letting go into what feels natural and being careful with my words. Any thoughts on this? I think it's a process. It's not like there's not a way to do this right. It's more like you're practicing being aware with speaking. Speaking is a really complex thing for most people to be aware of, because most people, as soon as they start speaking, they just go automatic. Yeah. And that's just a habit. And so people sometimes who've been meditating for a while, they notice, as soon as I start speaking, I come back later. So I'm saying this so that you are, just gentle with yourself in the process. It's nice that you're aware enough, even as you're talking, to be able to notice kind of the impulse to let the speech flow. And then you're also noticing at the same time some little thing saying like, be careful what you say, And so, as you continue in the cultivation, you'll start to get more familiar with the domain, right? And you'll start to get a sense of, and you'll learn also from going on one side and going on the other, letting it flow a little bit, and then. But one thing I would kind of posit, and you can see if this is true, because I know you've been practicing for a while. One of the things people think is they think if I let it flow, it's almost like then I have no control. But actually, if you let it flow, you can stay aware in the flowing. And so then you can still make in the moment decisions. It's almost like aimless wandering. You're wandering, but you're making choices from moment to moment. Yeah? So awareness can be present as you're allowing things to emerge. And then you can notice when something's emerging you're not sure about, and you can not say it. or you can say it. And you start to get a sense that way of like, the balance. So being present and allowing yourself to be in touch with what's true doesn't mean you say everything you think. I would not recommend that as a strategy in any way in your life. That'll get you in a lot of trouble and it will hurt a lot of people. Yeah? So it doesn't mean say everything you think, but be aware of what's arising in you, what you want to say. So you can start to get a sense of, okay, when am I impeding what's true out of some kind of habit? Yeah. And when is it when it's, skillful? It's like, oh, this is not useful to say, or this is true, but not a timely time to say it. So those are just a few thoughts about that. Let's see. Okay. Something I found helpful is rubbing my chest and having positive words of affirmation or self-embracing as a way of grounding. Yeah, that can be, putting a hand on the chest can be very, very grounding and stabilizing. Mark, I love your notion that this moment in history is an opportunity to meet ourselves, maybe for the first time. Do you have any advice on getting the epiphanies and lessons from this special time? I think our challenge is always, in a way, the answer is like, I don't have any special advice except to be here, because I think, life in a way is teaching us all the time. Yeah, all the time. There's, new things are presenting themselves, right? And so much of the time we're just not really here to learn, right? I said that thing before about life is the curriculum, but we're not signed up for the course. So my specific advice is be open to learning. Often we have idea of like, oh, these are teachers, I learn from them. Oh, this is like the place where I do meditation. That's where I do contemplation. That's where I learn stuff. But when we're open and really like open to learning can happen anywhere. You can get deep teachings from somebody on the street. Yeah, and that happens all the time. I have that happen all the time. One teaching which just came up the other day, which was from Teresa, was she had heard the phrase non-essential travel, or limit non-essential travel, because that's kind of what people are being encouraged to do. And she said she noticed she had that thought arise when she would have certain kinds of thoughts come into the mind. Limit non-essential travel. I think that's a very useful teaching. Yeah, and that teaching just appeared, in a moment of noticing, right? So that's something ingested from the news, but wow, there's a lot of non-essential travel up here. So we can just notice it. So anyway, Mark, I'm glad you're here and learning in this way and signed up for it. That's awesome. Let's see. Are there guidelines for action or inaction regarding the experience of visions, precognition, prophetic dreams, things like that? There might be, but I don't know what they are. I think, that's not a part of my experience in any kind of reliable way that I know of, So I know some people have visions or scenes of things, and then sometimes those things happen. I don't know much about that. I'm sure there are people who could answer that for you. But I think in terms of guidelines for action, we all have to, do our best with what we have, right? And sometimes, it's that decision of what is wise action. My invitation to you would be to listen in the deep way, listen down the layers in any situation, and that doesn't mean it's easy. These are really hard things. When to say something to somebody that however you know it. I think those are very, very tricky and very individual. Sometimes in meditation, my thoughts can be in the background. And sometimes it seems as though there isn't that space. I can notice the beginning of a thought arising and refocus on the breath instead. Though that isn't thoughts being like a river, because in a way it's cutting them off. Is this problematic? Because it's trying to cultivate a certain experience. I think it can be both and, sometimes you can notice a thought arise and you can watch it appear. Yeah? And then you can watch it linger and watch it disappear. Yeah? Sometimes you'll notice just the appearing. Sometimes you might notice just the disappearing. Yeah. Sometimes you might just notice the middle part. But this is a question of skillful means. So sometimes it's skillful to notice a thought and to come back to the breathing. This is actually something, I'm glad you said that, something I wanted to remind people of right now, because there's so much happening and it's so scary, and there's so much there's so much new news and it's so strong. I think it can be very useful at times to think about the breath, attending to the breath as a refuge. So not as an anchor, or sometimes you want to just come to here, and sometimes it's easiest to feel just the touch of the air at the nostrils as you breathe in and out, and really rest your attention here. I would encourage you, and think of that as like a rest. Sometimes when you need a refuge, it's like that. Sometimes that actually really deepens the practice. It's there because you need it. And that's another thing, relates to what Mark was asking before about how to make use of this time. One of the truths about when a lot of our usual structures break down is sometimes when things are going along normally okay, people don't necessarily feel compelled to practice. They don't need it as much. And so a lot of times people just skirt along the surface until things break down. And they break down for one reason or another. You go through a breakup, you lose your job, you get sick, things don't work out the way you want them to work out, you hit bottom in some way. And often that's a breakdown of structures. And so sometimes you need a refuge. And when you need it, I had a friend who's a meditation teacher, and she went through a terrible divorce. And she described how she, just for a year, was just religiously coming back to the breathing. And she got so concentrated from being with the breath so much. It deepened her practicing so much. Right? And so sometimes when you need it, you go to the breathing for refuge. And that really allows the mind to get concentrated at levels that are, the degree to which the mind can get concentrated is kind of unthinkable. Well, it is unthinkable. It's beyond thinking. So sometimes people think, oh, I'm with the breath a little bit, I know what that is. No, you don't necessarily know what that is. Right? So I think that's a wonderful way. In a way, that's part of the invitation of this time, is to really, sometimes you notice the thinking, but you're not going to watch it, and you're just going to come back to the breathing, and you can take refuge in the breath. Yeah? So sometimes the breathing is like, it's an anchor or a support, almost like, like Odysseus asking to be lashed to the mast so that he can hear the songs of the sirens without like getting totally pulled onto the rocks. So sometimes the breathing's like that. It helps you stay steady with strong states that would normally take you over. And sometimes the breath is more like a refuge. You just leave, like a safe harbor. You go to the breathing to rest, to regroup, to find some stillness inside. And that can be very powerful. My godfather used to say, I have a well of peace inside myself. I can go there anytime I like. That's pretty powerful. And that's just talking about concentration. So thank you for that. So anyway, both and. Sometimes within the stability of awareness, you watch the thought stream, the thoughts moving. It's just like part of what's happening. And sometimes you can really come back to the breathing and rest the mind, and find stillness in ways that are very rejuvenating. Yeah. Isn't meditation to be without thought? There might be some kinds of meditations that are about being without thought, but this kind that we're doing is not at all. In fact, if you try to be without thought, you will get tense, yeah, and you'll fail, because the mind is made to think. Yeah, it's like thinking is a part of experience. So much more useful, I'd say, to learn how to be present with thinking, and let it be part of what's happening, but not running you. So the problem with your thoughts is not that you have them; it's that you believe them all. Yeah, it's not that you have them; it's that they carry you all the time and they move you around. Yeah, so thinking's wonderful. Look at all of our society and all the incredible things we create all the time, and we can imagine the future and build new things, and that is a beautiful thing. So anyway, meditation is not, in my understanding and in the kind of practice we're doing, it's not about being without thought. There may be meditations that are sort of, that's the goal. But thank you for that. I asked this before, but found the body scan particularly useful, and wanted to know if I have specific recommendations for body scans online or Dharma talks about that. The only body scan recordings that I know, the only recorded body scans that I know of are the ones from, John Kabat-Zinn's, who I'm related to, his body scan. So he has recordings. I'm sure you can find them online. And I like his a lot. It's 45 minutes. Other ones I'm not so sure of, and a lot of people don't talk about that. And then, S.N. Goenka has his own method of sweeping through the body, which is very, very developed. And I think that's, even though I'm not steeped in that tradition and I've never done that practice, I think it's very powerful. And from what I hear, so that might be something you might want to look into also. If you believe in yourself as much as you believe in false gods and false idols, then you can be your own God. Well, that's, in a way, that makes me want to share this story. It's from Punjaji, Papaji. And I shared this with some of the folks in the intensive. But there's a great exchange between him and his teacher, Ramana Maharshi, where he says to Ramana, like, I want you to show me God. Ramana Maharshi is this amazing saint in southern India. Right? I want you to show me God. I'll do anything. Well, can you show me him? And Ramana says, I can't show you God. He says, because God is not an object to be seen. He says, God is the subject. God is the seer. Find out who the seer is. So, anyway, thank you for that comment. Tyranny. Hi, Tyranny. When I try to bring awareness to thinking, often the thoughts vanish or change. The stream is disrupted. Any thoughts about how to bring awareness gently so as not to alter them like that? I have many thoughts about that. So thinking is, as much as it is rules our world and our minds and is completely tyrannizing, and leads to so much, terrible suffering and othering and in our world, thoughts can be shy. So often when people are meditating and they first start to try to watch the mind, like you say, there's a little too much intent in the watching. There's too much energy in it. And so that makes the thoughts kind of lose their vividness. It's like the dream fades because you're too awake, or there's too much wakefulness. That happens like if you're lucid dreaming too. You get too excited, the dream starts to fade. So often, and it's just like people are excited to watch the mind, which is super interesting, because whoever told you to watch your own mind? Yeah. Once you watch your mind and you start to be interested in that, that's the big shift for people when they realize, oh, so much of what is happening is just about what's happening in here. Yeah. So ways to relax it, the watching. So basically, when there's too much psychic energy in the watching, the state disappears, and that happens anytime, like, somebody's in a completely uncontrollable rage and the cops show up, yeah, and all of a sudden they're calm. How's that possible? They could never have calmed down. It's because so much of their energy got into like the awareness that the state faded real fast. Yeah. So sometimes, I know that's an extreme example, but sometimes when you're trying to watch like that, the thoughts get. So I'd say just have the attention be more relaxed, almost like have it be in your peripheral vision, so you're not watching with such intent. Yeah. Then you might start to notice like they appear more clearly, but it's not so much out there. Just sort of like, oh, now it's a scene. Yeah. So sometimes that watching is just a little too intense, and it just means you're like excited. And I've totally been through that too, and I think that's great. Whoa, I can watch this. So just relax a little soft gaze. Animals are shy. If you like try to watch them, they run away. Kids are like that. If you're too like intent and like, they. So you want to just be chill, be a little relaxed with your mind, and then you might start to be able to notice it more clearly. Yeah, MBSR has good body scans too. Thank you for that. Sai, talking about the true nature of awareness, there's the recognition of it, aha, and then there's the abiding in the recognition. Can you please talk a bit about the abiding? Well, it's hard to talk about. In a way, in different traditions have different language around this. In some of the Tibetan traditions, they talk about familiarizing yourself with it. But basically, I think that, if we think about it as trying to abide, you're actually always abiding in awareness. You just don't notice it. Yeah, you're in it all the time, right? So sometimes just remembering to notice that is kind of the ongoing abiding. It's like, oh, just notice that experience is happening. There's a recognition of it. And then there's some abiding until some state arises, yeah, that you don't include. So really, I think the interesting way is you recognize that awareness is functioning, and then include what appears. Include the mind states that appear, include the body states that appear. So a lot of that helps the abiding just start to feel more palpable, yeah, and more ongoing, because it's actually continuous. You just are losing awareness of it. You're getting caught up again in the mind stream a little bit, which is natural, right? So it's normal. Yeah. So the more you can just include the mind stream as part of what's unfolding, that's when the abiding really starts to be palpable more. Yeah. But again, there's phrases like short moments many times. Again, that's from the Tibetans. Or they're kind of like getting used to this kind of way of seeing is another way to think about it. Sometimes in Vedanta, they talk a little bit more like that, where it's just like, again, not my tradition particularly, but I read a lot of different ways that people talk about this, and teachings have talked about it. So yeah, just continuing to notice. You can do little bits of inquiry, like, oh, or a little inquiry. Anytime you start to feel like you're losing touch with that, it's like, oh, is the world appearing? Mm. Are thoughts appearing? Yeah. Is the body appearing? Yeah. So that kind of helps you just notice. It's like you're seeing all the time, but you're not always aware that you're seeing. It's just like, oh, I'm going around. If nobody said be aware of seeing as an experience, you wouldn't be aware in the seeing. Yeah. So, but you can just be aware in the seeing. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Yeah, somebody asked about SN Goenka. Yeah, Goenka has centers. If you just Google Goenka, he has a whole methodology. And the only downside of I think Goenka's method is that he's really into like, that's the only way to practice. And if you do that, you can't do any other things. And so sometimes it can feel a little bit like closed-minded like that. I happen to think because I'm open-minded about different ways of practicing, that their method is very powerful, even though it doesn't do everything. They don't do a lot of awareness with thinking, from what I know and have heard. Oh, hi, Karen. All right. So I think that's a good time for us to wrap it up. It looks like there are some more questions, but we'll have to leave them for now. And uh, so right now, can you notice that the room you're sitting in is appearing to you? All of experience is here and now, including your thoughts about the future, your impulses, even the moving of your attention, that appears to you, appears in awareness. There's a stillness that's here in the midst of all the activity, often unnoticed. Like a ground of all experience is this natural awareness, this wakefulness that is you. And even your mind stream is appearing within it. So we can't say this enough times, just to remind us, to remind you to notice, and to remind you to investigate in your own experience to see if it's true. So when they talk about the Buddha, when they talk about, Buddha nature, that's your nature right here and now. That's what's already here. And our condition, though, is that we've become totally taken over by the patterning, by the conditioning, by the thoughts that appear. So many of them are from the past. They come from the past. They're your interpretation of the world. They were told to you by other people. They come from society, what have you. Not that they're all not useful, but that conditioning, or the conditioned patterns of behavior and reacting, or ways of behaving, all of that conditioning met with what? Met with your own being, your own nature, which includes this conditioning, but is not limited to it. This vastness, when you look out over the hills, and you look out over the water, you look out from the top of your building, with the window, all of that is appearing within what? The spaciousness, which is here all the time. Even when you're in a little room, your awareness is not limited by how far you can see in that way. So let's sit together again. We'll have another meeting like this next week. We may do it on YouTube, or we may do it in some other. We're still experimenting with the platform, so stay tuned. If you're not on the email list, you can go to sundaysangha.net and get on our email list, and I'll keep you informed that way. And again, we'll have a morning meditation at 7 a.m. tomorrow. We won't have the chat on for that. We'll just have a quiet sitting. Okay, so let's just sit for a moment to kind of formally close. So may each one of us, in our own way, continue to look deeply into the nature of things, into the nature of our own minds, bodies, and the nature of our own wakefulness, our own awareness. And in this process, maybe be willing to see things, to meet things as they are. And may this clear seeing, this clear knowing, free us. And may this be for the benefit not only of ourselves, but of all beings everywhere, near and far, in whatever condition. Let's wake up to our own nature and help relieve all beings from suffering. Okay, thank you all. Take care. Be well. Kevin, JD, Olivier, and Cheryl. Thank you. Andrew. Hi. And Ari. All right. Orly and Brian. Hey, Brandon. Wonderful. Nice to see your names there. Lee. Okay, take care. See you soon.